Artificial intelligence, or AI, is what we have been seeing and hearing everywhere lately. So, today we will dive deep into this topic and talk about its power and its limitations. How can you use it, and how can organizations and companies use it in an ethical and responsible manner? That being said, welcome to a new season of Career 360, our podcast where we answer to all the questions related to your professional life. Our guest today is Adelina Balasa, SRAI Cloud Solutions Architect at Microsoft UK. Welcome, Adelina.
Welcome, Yulia, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
My pleasure. Do you want to tell us a few things about yourself first?
Sure. Where should I start? I think I'll actually start 15 years ago when I was choosing my university degree. And I remember back then I really wanted to study AI abroad in the United Kingdom. And my parents and the conversation I was having with them was around, Adelina, you should choose a proper degree, choose computer science, choose software engineering. What is AI? Because back then we didn't have this, but I'm really glad I didn't listen to them on that occasion. And I followed my passion, and I've been working in the AI field ever since I got out of university. And now I work as an AI architect in Microsoft. And my job basically is to be an AI advisor. I work with customers across all the industries, and I guide them and advise them on how to adopt AI safely and responsibly.
Wow, that's really interesting. A friend of mine said once that parents' best intentions, but not always best advice. I think it's also because I think we live in such different worlds right now. But I'm happy to hear that you followed your dream, let's say, and you've got there. So you're definitely the right person to talk about AI. And I have so many questions for you today, as I'm sure many of our listeners have as well. So any questions you guys have, just leave in the comments and we'll try to answer as soon as we can. But we promise we will answer all of them. So let's start with, can you tell us what is up with this era of AI? Like, what has it changed and why now?
Of course. So it's already slang. You may hear the era of AI, in many places. And why are we talking about this? AI has been around for quite some time, and actually, what I learned in university, and rightly so, is that Alan Turing was the founding father of computer science and the first person to create an artificial intelligence machine in the Second World War. I'm referring to the Enigma machine, and if you've seen the film on Netflix, The Imitation Game, that's the one I'm talking about. And that was really the start of AI. And since then, we've seen a few big hoops in innovation. So the first one was in the 90s when IBM created the Deep Blue, in the Deep Blue project, a chess AI. And the algorithm that they've created managed to beat the best chess player in the world at that time, Garry Kasparov. And the way they've designed the algorithm was with Bayesian probabilities. Now, this is not very familiar to those of you who don't work in the field, but it's based on probabilities, and it was with specifying what exactly are the chess rules and how to play. And that's, that kind of opened the door for organizations to see the possibility of adopting AI and having that as a booster in how they do their work and their productivity levels. And actually, these types of algorithms are still used quite heavily in healthcare. So that was the first step that where we've seen the power of AI. The second one was just about 15 years ago, maybe, or even less than that, where AlphaGo created another type of AI, and again, it was applied in the world of games. So I'm talking about the Go algorithm that managed to beat the best Go player in the world at that time, Lee Sedol. And what was special about this type of AI was that it was based on deep neural networks and reinforcement learning. What does that mean? Deep neural networks is basically looking at how our brains are wired, how our brains work together, well, work independently and maybe work together. And it tried to recreate that. So it's an artificial neural network. And they didn't teach it how to play the game Go. It just trained it on millions of games played between humans, and also games played between an AI and another AI. And this is the part of the reinforcement learning. And it just learned from observing all these many games, and it became so good at it that it managed to beat the best player in the world at Go. And these neural networks are, they've opened the door to new possibilities with AI, and we use them in image recognition and voice detection and video analysis and so on. And now we see another leap in AI with generative AI. And why are we talking about generative AI, and what's different between generative AI and all of these types of AI we've had so far? So generative AI is built on the neural network approach that we've seen with AlphaGo. It's an involved way of implementing deep neural networks, and it's different because it's generating new content. All the AI algorithms we've had so far were trained on a specific type of data for a specific purpose. But generative AI is trained on a huge amount of data and all sorts of data, text, images, video, audio, a huge corpus of text, numerical data, all sorts of data. And it's not trained with a specific purpose. You may also hear the term foundational models. So generative AI models are foundational models because they can be adapted to any task. Well, not quite any task, but many tasks where you need to generate content. And we haven't had this before, and this is why we're talking about a new era of AI, because we've discovered the power of generative AI.
So in the beginning, it was a bit more part of the gaming world, let's say, and now it's becoming part of everyone's world. Let's put it that way. And this is a generative AI. So why is it so powerful? And I'm also curious, what are some limitations that it has as well?
Yeah, I think AI has been around for a long time, and many times we don't even realize we're using it. For example, when we write a text on our phone and we have the next word predicted for us, that's using AI. When we use the Google Maps in our phone and we see how bad the traffic is, that's another form of AI. The weather prediction is another form of AI. So we use it without even realizing we're using it. But generative AI, we're just discovering its potential. And I'd like to encourage everyone to look at generative AI as a tool. And you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. It has power, but it has limitations as well. So in terms of why it's powerful and how you can use it, it's really, really good at understanding natural language. You can interact with it in natural language, whether that's typed natural language or spoken natural language, depending on which model you use, of course. But it's really good at understanding that and at responding to you in natural language. And this is amazing because basically you don't need to be a programmer, you don't need to be a developer or to have much knowledge about the tech industry overall to be able to use these models. And there's a saying now in the tech world that English is the new programming language, because you instruct the model what you want it to do and it does that for you. So that's a huge power that the other AI algorithms so far haven't been that great at. The second one is creative capabilities. So it's able to generate content, it's able to write articles, to generate art, to compose music. These are some of the more popular ones, but from an organization perspective, for example, if you're a researcher, you can generate synthetic data, you can simulate scenarios and do like a what if analysis on various scenarios. It's basically accelerating the any task that you're doing. And in terms of accelerating, I mean this by it can automate. So it can automate data entry. If you have to fill in a form, it can automatically fill in the form for you. Or if you're reading, a book or an essay, it can automatically extract data or summarize data. It improves productivity in many industries. But all this power can also, be
Come with some
limited.
limitations.
Yeah, yes, it's very easy to say, oh, it's amazing and it can, do everything, but it can't really do anything. It's at the end of the day, it's an algorithm that predicts, the next sequence in a large sequence. So if it's text, it predicts the next word. If it's an image, it predicts the next pixels. If it's sound, it predicts what is the next sound. And it's that simple, but it's really powerful in this respect. But this is the limitation. It's just predicting the next thing. So in terms of limitations, sometimes you may hear the words hallucinations. It can hallucinate because it's generating the most probable next word if we're talking about text. That doesn't necessarily mean that the next word is the right word. So if you're asking it to be very precise about a year when something happened, for example, if you're asking it who is, I don't know, the president of Romania in 2024, it might give you an answer. And of course, that is wrong. It's not predicting who the next president is going to be.
Yeah.
It's just an algorithm that predicts text.
So it
So
also makes up information sometimes.
exactly,
Based on the questions you might ask, it might give you like false data, basically.
exactly. So hallucinations are one of the most, well, I think the biggest limitation that we've seen with it so far. And I think it's also the people's expectations that we expect it to do miraculous things, but at the end of the day, it's just an algorithm that predicts the next sequence. So not quite a limitation, but in a way, it is a limitation because we expect it to do so much more.
Yes, it ultimately is a tool, a powerful tool, but still a tool. I'm curious, what are the most common uses that you have seen for generative AI?
Yeah, so well, I think as a user, um, everybody is using generative AI, and ChatGPT is very popular. But as a user, we're using it for questions and answers. And it's, so far we've had search engines like Google or Bing or other search engines. And we're seeing it as an addition to a search engine where instead of, you search for a question and you get links to 10 websites, you just get the answer directly. So it's quite common to, to summarize the results of really big amount of text from many websites into just a short answer. So Q&A is one, probably the biggest use case if you're an individual user. If you're an organization, it's quite different. What organizations want is to be able to chat with their data. We say in the tech world, chat with your data, chat with my data. What this means is semantic Q&A over enterprise data. And then you find more limitations around which users have access to which data. You have to be careful that your data doesn't leak outside of your organization. You want it to be very accurate, so you may want to show citations. So if you get an answer, you want to show the user exactly which document is that answer coming from, to mitigate for potential hallucinations. So semantic Q&A over enterprise data is a very popular use case. And probably the next one is virtual agents. Again, for example, if you want to call a support service from a bank or from your mobile company, you would speak with an agent. Maybe that agent has to find or search for the information internally in order to give you the information. And then once the call ends, they might need to summarize what you've talked about, discuss next actions, write all the notes. So generative AI can automate most of those things. It can do the enterprise search so that you get the answer very quickly. It can automatically summarize the call. It can extract the key information about what your problem was, what the next steps are. So virtual agents, not necessarily in the support service, but virtual agents as a whole is probably the second biggest use case. And really, if you've asked me this question 6 months ago, I would be quite limited, and I would say, well, people are still experimenting with generative AI. But right now, there are so many creative ways. Even in fashion industry, for example, we're looking at pictures of the model wearing, a skirt, a top, sunglasses, and so on. And you can make recommendations on other items that would go with the items the model is wearing. It's getting really creative and really interesting.
Yeah, I've seen recently even I think a shop online that creates fashion made by AI, so really clothing. It's definitely part of our world, I think, on a daily basis right now. And as you said, I think the most common is those chats AI when you try to ask a question for a company or something like that. But I think that we cannot talk about the era of AI without talking about the ethical and responsible AI. So, what can you tell us about the existing and what do you think are some upcoming legislation in this space?
Yes, it's a very good question. And what I would like to mention here is that generative AI has had different emotional impacts on people. So some folks are very enthusiastic about it, and some are quite apprehensive, and rightly so. And actually, generative AI has accelerated these feelings around AI as a whole. The European Union has started a legislation called the EU AI Act, I think a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken, which was looking to regulate the use of AI, and not just generative AI, but all of AI. And so the European Union has been one of the first worldwide organizations to look at this. They want to be at the forefront of, let's make sure we implement AI safely. Generative AI is speeding up the need for legislation because we want to trust the AI. And I think no organization is really going to adopt AI unless they really trust it. And generative AI can be, it can be interesting because it can generate and hallucinate. So how do we control it? And it's a big question. We have some techniques, but if we look, high level at legislation for AI, the European Union is proposing to regulate the use of AI by identifying 3 levels of risk. So, for example, if we have an AI algorithm that plays chess, for example, or let's say I was discussing with the colleagues, if we have an AI algorithm that predicts how sweet the wine is going to be based on I don't know, where the grapes are coming from and the weather and that year and the acidity in the wine, and I'm not sure, but if we have these
Sounds
types
great.
if we have these types of models, then they have very low impact on society as a whole. So they would be able to pass without too much restrictions. And then we have the medium layer of impact on an individual and on society, and then the high risk impact on an individual and on society. So, for example, and then the fourth one is to actually ban some of the uses of AI, which has a huge impact on individual society and democracy as we know it. So, for example, a banned use case would be, public surveillance cameras that would do facial recognition on you as a citizen just walking around the street. That will absolutely not be allowed. But for some of the higher risk use cases, so for example, if a bank gathers data and tries to predict whether you should get a mortgage or a loan, or whether they should offer you a service or not, that's quite high risk, and that's because it affects you at an individual level. And if something in that AI model is wrong or biased, then you are denied the service, even if you should get that service. So in these cases, there will be higher requirements, and those requirements are more around fairness and transparency and so on. So I think it's really good that we have, or we will have legislation in this space. And the EU is not the only one. We're seeing this in the UK, in the US, in Brazil, in Asia. So I'm quite certain in a couple of years, same as how GDPR came along and had a big shift on the way we use personal data, the AI legislation is going to come along and have a big impact on how AI is being used.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think everybody has this questions what the laws are going to be around it, what's going to happen. What I'm also curious about are there any responsible AI best practices specifically for generative AI?
Yes, indeed. So it's quite different for generative AI than for traditional AI models. If you are, let's say, a data scientist, or you're an organization who has a team of data scientists, then you have a typical machine learning model lifecycle. You gather some data, you prepare the data, you clean it, then you start building your model. So you choose the algorithms, you can choose the tools that you want, your programming languages, your dev tools, and so on. Then you start building your model and you do iterations of training and retraining and testing on the data. And then finally, once you're happy with the model, you usually register it in a way that you can version it or containerize it. And finally, you deploy it. And once you deploy it, you do continuous monitoring, you look for data drift, and so on. So this is typical machine learning model lifecycle. And if you if you're an organization who does this, then you need to apply responsible AI best practices at each of these steps. So, for example, in your data, you need to make sure that your data is unbiased, is fair. If you have, for example, males and females in your data, you need to make sure that the amount of data you have about females is more or less the same as the amount of data you have about males. Otherwise, if you have 90% data about males and 10% data about females, your AI algorithm is also going to be biased towards a male population. So there are many applications of ethical and responsible AI in the model lifecycle. But for generative AI, I'm assuming that most organizations are not going to build their own large language models or their own foundational models, because you need such, first of all, you need skills, the right skills, the right people to know deep neural networks really well and to build the large language models. But secondly, you need a lot of data. So you need to scrape the internet. That's going to be very expensive. And again, you require those skills. And thirdly, you'll need the infrastructure, the compute power. And I mean, a huge amount of compute power in order to build large language models or generative AI models. So I'm assuming 99% of the cases you will not build your own. Therefore, you will use one of the existing large language models, either open source or provided by a company, by a cloud provider like Microsoft, for example. And there are other cloud providers who will offer generative AI models too. So if you take the model and you use it, then you have more responsibilities to show that you're doing responsible AI in the right way. And I want to mention here that it's a shared responsibility model between the cloud provider or the service provider who has trained that model, because that cloud provider, that service provider, is going through that machine learning model lifecycle, and they need to implement all the responsible AI best practices when they build a model and when they deploy it. Then after it's being deployed, you as an organization need to take that model and apply a few other things. So specifically for generative AI, we are looking at identifying, measuring, and then mitigating potential risks. So hallucinations, for example, could be a potential risk, or generating content or responding with content that's harmful, that's violent, or that's sexual content, or about self-harm, or hateful content. Those are not acceptable if we want a good civilization, a good society to live in. So you need to look at first of all, choosing your model is the first thing you can do to mitigate for generative AI harm. Choosing your model, grounding your model, fine-tuning your model, all of these are things you need to look at first. The second one is the safety model. So make sure that you don't allow any, for example, violent model to come in or to get out of your system. And here I want to add an asterisk or a caveat, because it really depends on the industry. For example, in healthcare, you want to get information or text or notes about potentially violent or content about that self-harm, because you want to analyze that. If you have content about blood or cuts, then maybe in an education system you may not want to allow that model, but in a healthcare system you want to allow it. So looking at what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for industry is the next level up. And the third layer of mitigation is looking at prompt engineering. So again, this is something we see very often with generative AI. And as I mentioned earlier, English is the new programming language, in the sense of you can tell your model what you want it to do and what you do not want it to do. And there are so many prompt engineering techniques now, and you need to really look at the meta prompt and make sure you cater for potential jailbreaks, for example, setting the tone. If you're having a Q&A agent, what is the tone of that agent? And many other things that we can. I think prompt engineering is a topic on its own. We probably need a podcast specifically for prompt engineering. And then finally, and again, this is so important, and I hope it will get more attention from the developers as a whole, is UI and UX, so user interface. Because the way we position a generative AI model to a user is really important. And what I mean by this is make sure that you tell the users, this is just an algorithm, or this is just an AI. You're not actually talking to a human. The algorithm can be wrong, or how I mentioned before, make sure you provide citations. If it's giving you an answer, make sure you're linking back to the source document where it's giving you the answer. And all of this has nothing to do with the model in itself, but it's about how the front end layer is being designed for the end user. So there's quite a lot of work to be done, and very quickly you may want to jump to, oh, I just need to tweak the model. But it's about the whole system and all the people working on building that system, from the data scientists all the way to UI, UX designers.
That's very interesting. Now we talked about limitations and strengths that Gen AI has, and how do you think organization can start with AI?
I think it really depends on where you are as an organization. So, are you still operating on-prem, or have you already migrated to the cloud? And I'm starting with this because I usually like to mention that AI is the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more work that you need to do before you get started with AI. And your infrastructure is the first one you need to look at. And of course, if you're on the cloud, it's more easy for you to innovate, because you have all the cloud technologies either as a platform as a service or software as a service. Your data is more accessible. You can scale quicker, scale up, scale down. There are so many more benefits of being on the cloud. So first, I would start with a question: where do you operate, on-prem or on the cloud? And what is your the next level up is your data estate, and what is your data strategy? Because you need to have data that's clean, that you trust, that's in a in a good format, in a good state, before you connect it to the AI. Data lineage, data governance are some very big topics you need to consider. Otherwise, you're just going to put an AI model on top of your data and you will not trust it, not because you don't trust the model, but because you're not sure about the data that you have. So having a good data strategy is the next level up. And finally, once you have these two in a good state, you can look at AI. And specifically with generative AI, I like the fact that it can connect or use both structured data, the typical SQL databases or data we have in databases, and unstructured data, text, documents, images, and so on. And really, when you, as an organization, you always have both. And what we've been seeing so far is that data strategy included more the structured data. But I'm hoping that now generative AI is going to push organizations out of their comfort zone and think about a data strategy, both about structured and unstructured data, and apply the AI layer on top. And what I want to mention on the AI layer is it's very easy to think generative AI is the best AI for your use case because it's so powerful. But I would really encourage everyone to check out other AI algorithms that could be cheaper, could be faster, um, and could be less risky, so to say, in terms of hallucinations or giving you a wrong answer. So if you're trying to make a prediction, you shouldn't really use generative AI because that's not really making predictions. You should look at other AI that's specifically doing predictions. If you want to detect, I don't know, what is this image about? There are so many other, deep neural network algorithms specifically for images. So making sure you have the right AI for the right use case, and
Yeah.
combining generative AI with other forms of AI is what you should look at. To get started, I think many large language models are open source, and you can take one of those and simply use it, through the API, send some data, get some data back, and explore with it. But to do it properly in production, you have to follow these, the iceberg rules: infrastructure, data, and then AI.
Yeah, so basically knowing exactly what the business needs are and then choosing the right AI for you,
That's right.
if I understood that correctly.
Yes, and what we see now, Julia, is something new. So we now see chief AI officers, and so far maybe you've seen chief innovation officers, chief data officers, but now we have chief AI officers, and I really hope we'll also see chief responsible AI officers. And I think it's depending on the maturity of the organization. I encourage some organizations who are a little bit more mature to also develop their own AI strategy.
Yeah. Now, you've answered a lot of the questions we had about AI, and I think that we understand it a little bit better. My question is for the ones that are listening and watching us, how can they stay up to date with the tech news and tech trends?
Actually, when I interviewed for the job I'm currently in, one of the interview questions was, how do I stay up to date with the technology? Because in the tech world, it everything moves so fast. It's an industry that moves so fast. I mean, we've had generative AI for some time, but not until ChatGPT was launched that the generative AI space really started to gain attention and the right level of attention. And it's so moving so fast. So it is essential to stay up to date. First things first, it's not just a nice to have; it's a must have. So of course, if you work in the tech industry, if you want to get into the tech industry, you can follow tech news websites, you can read blogs or follow social media accounts from tech influencers. Listen to podcasts. I listen a lot to podcasts like this one that we're on now, and conferences. Conferences are personally my favorite way to stay up to date. And we have the upcoming conference, I Love Tech, and I think that's a great way to stay up to date and find out what's new.
That's really interesting. I think conferences are also great because you get to connect with people in your field and to stay informed. Tell us a bit more about the I Love Tech conference. How can our listeners be part of it?
Yep, I think the really great thing about this event is that it's been specifically designed to inspire and empower the tech community. On stages, there are top global companies such as Microsoft, Amazon, GitLab, Yugabyte DB, and so many others. And you can discover new opportunities. You can connect with leading companies, not just the ones that are presenting, but the ones that are attending. And irrespective of whether you're just getting started or whether you already have a background, whether you're mid-career level or a seasoned, experienced technologist. When I go to conferences, I always make time for the keynote speeches, and then I usually try to connect with some industry leaders in the networking breaks. And yeah, basically you connect with people, you collaborate, you can find mentors, you can even find job offers, or if you're recruiting, you can find potential candidates for the jobs you have open. And I Love Tech is going to be in Timișoara on the 14th of October, and it's also going to be in Bucharest on the 28th of October. And it's free to join. It's for anyone. So there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't attend if you work in the tech field.
That's great. We will leave in the comments section as well links where you can register for either I Love Tech Timișoara or I Love Tech Bucharest. And you probably should secure your spot fast because I hear that is getting quite busy and there's not that much space left. Now, thank you so much for being with us today, Adelina, and to answer to all our curiosity and questions about AI. And I'm hoping to see you soon. And for the ones that are listening, I'm hoping to see you and see you at our next podcast and as well at I Love Tech conference.
Yes, thank you very much, Julia, for having me here, and see you on the next podcast or at the conference in person. Thank you.
See you.